and the Ghana Police Service will from next week roll out a special complaints mechanism to deal with assault against journalists in the country. This forms part of a comprehensive media engagement program to enhance the relationship between journalists and the service. The attacks on journalists by the police in recent times and the unresolved nature of these cases has increased concerns about the safety of journalists in the country. But speaking to Joy News on the sidelines of a forum on National Coordinating Mechanism on Safe and Responsible Journalism, Director of Public Affairs for the Police Service, ACP David Eklu, says the program will begin with training of selected journalists in police operations.
For the police, we have already taken some pragmatic steps. That is, we are working with the various media groupings, the NMC, GJA, JIBA, Primpac, under the auspices of the Media Foundation for West Africa. A framework on improving relations between the police and the media has been approved by the police administration. And in this framework, there are key elements. One, the training of police officers on media relations, outlining the responsibilities of journalists and the police, especially during police operations, and then also a complaint mechanism where infractions against journalists and also infractions against police officers by journalists would be looked at, and then we take it up to the National Media Commission. And under this framework, we are going to have these regional committees where journalists who are affected by police operations in
Let's get more on the fight against attacks on journalists, and Joy News' editor Araba Kumsing and a leading member of the Alliance for Women in Media Africa was present at this conference, and we understand there's a document that was adopted at this meeting. Tell us more about this.
Well,
document.
So this conference mainly is the first step in a series of engagement with stakeholders that include not just, people in the media space, but, the police service, the judiciary, the NCC. I mean, it cuts across board, so that when there are issues involving, the media that relate to some of these stakeholders, we can easily reach out to them and address those issues. So a document will be formulated and presented at a later stage. But today was the start of the engagement, and and today's program really focused on, putting together the National Coordinating Committee on Safety of Journalists, and we have a number of stakeholders. Like I said, the GJA is a member, and several others. So basically, their mandate covers education to stakeholders on the need, in ensuring safe and responsible media environment in Ghana. So if it means that the police needs to undertake education and awareness creation for their personnel to understand the role of the media, that will happen. If it means that the media itself ought to undertake sensitization and awareness creation drives for its members, that needs to happen. So everybody should understand the roles of each person so that, we can work together cohesively. Also, the committee is expected to develop a framework for the validation of attacks and threats on journalists, and also put out annual publications on the safety of journalists and complaints against journalists, as well as, come up with interventions to ensure the prevention of attacks on journalists, protection of journalists, and prosecution of persons involved in attacks against journalists. So essentially, today's program was the start of the first in a series of engagements that will lead to, the formation of this committee, and then the committee will then also come out with a document. In fact, in 3 months' time after the committee is formed, it is to establish a joint national monitoring and reporting system for media rights violations and mechanisms for supporting investigations and prosecution of perpetrators.
That's a very interesting one, and we'll get more on how to operationalize all of this they put in the document. But meanwhile, the Information Minister, Kojo Ponkroma, is confident the stakeholder meeting will help produce a document that will enhance the cause of safe and responsible journalism.
One of the first points I want to
We'll try and fix this and bring to you the Information Minister's perspective of this whole document in saving journalists from attack. But I'm more interested in how this document that's going to be put together will be operationalized, and so that at the end of the day, or that would actually lead to saving journalists from being attacked.
Well, like I said, the document hasn't yet been put together. It's still in the process. We are in the engagement process right now. So that would have to be done as a first step before, and take the input from the various stakeholders so that we can agree commonly on what to do going forward. And then we can discuss and specify specifically what ought to be done to protect, journalists in the discharge of their duties.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in the bigger picture, we've been talking about responsible journalism.
Right.
In terms of this being responsible as a journalist, what does this document also say?
Well, in fact, it came up during the discussions today, the stakeholder engagement today, and the initial suggestion for the committee as name was that it should be named the National Coordinating Committee on Safety and Responsible Journalism. But stakeholders, even including the chairman of the NMC, the National Media Commission, felt that we ought to delete the use of the word responsible from this committee, because then the argument is that government keeps harping on responsible journalism, but depending on where you stand, that becomes debatable. When a political party is not in power, they don't agree that you should use the word responsible, rather professional. But when they are in power, then they feel that it's important to inject that bit into the whole narrative. So the consensus was that we take out the use of the word responsible journalism and replace it with professionalism, because that will all come under professionalism. If you're a professional journalist and you do your work professionally, you'll be responsible, you'll be ethical, you play by the rules and all of that. And so that came up very strongly. But of course, it's not to lose sight of the fact that journalists ought to do their work professionally and do so in a responsible manner. So that is an important and crucial aspect of the conversation. So I do believe that by the time that the committee is done with its work and presents its draft document, that aspect will be highlighted.
This comes to me as good news, and I'm sure it comes to other journalists, including you, Araba, as good news, and I'm sure a number of them were at this program. We'll talk about their response to this initiative, but the Canadian High Commission has also added their voice. The High Commissioner, Dr. Heather Cameron, urged journalists to ensure they protect their platforms from hate speech as we inch closer to the 2020 elections.
Ghana continues to make strides towards ensuring media freedom and also other enabling acts that will help to ensure freedom of expression. We are very pleased to see that the Right to Information Act was signed into law earlier this year. And we look forward to it aiding journalists and citizens to strengthen transparency and accountability in public affairs. As Ghana approaches its elections next year, it's important to ensure, too, that we work together to combat hate speech, as well as just media freedom. And so we want to see a public space where Ghanaians can debate issues without fear, and that they feel safe in engaging in civic debate. Canada also has an election coming up this year. And in May, our Prime Minister unveiled a new digital charter to work with the international social media companies to tackle misinformation and violent extremism online.
You heard the Canadian High Commission there talking about how we can prevent attacks on the press. But Araba, like I said, this comes as good news, but I'm sure there are a number of journalists who are also responding to that. What has been their response to this initiative, and how do they intend to push for this to happen?
Well, Aisha, obviously we are all in this media space. A lot of our colleagues in this space have welcomed this move by government. I have to say, though, that this is a UN plan of action that the government is jumping on. But because it's become imperative because of the incessant reports that we're hearing of threats against journalists and journalists not operating in a safe environment. So government felt that it was important to partner the stakeholders, you know, to curb this trend that we're seeing. But many within the media space have welcomed it. They think it's a good move because it's important for us to work in a safe and secure environment. And so the engagement doesn't stop today. It continues. And of course, there are representatives from the GJA as well as the ALMA, the Alliance for Women in Media Africa. And we intend to push through to see that the document it comes out so that we can all go by it. It's a working document for all of us. So within 3 months after this committee is formed, you would be seeing a lot more being done, and hopefully we'll see a reduction in the incidence of threats against journalists.
Many thanks to you. Araba Kumsin is editor with JoyNews and is also a leading member of the Alliance for Women in Media Africa. Truly grateful for your time, Araba.